We've got a proliferation of IT services. We've got an ever-changing threat landscape, and ultimately we need to make some sensible and intelligent decisions about our purchases and our architecture in some cases. So how do we advise businesses and customers on how they can make those intelligence decisions at the point that they adopt new digital technology?
Well, obviously the answer is it depends, because it always is. But I think, you know, there's no replacement for understanding your landscape, understanding your environment and what you've got. I tend to refer to kind of the jigsaw analogy. So understanding the kind of coverage that you've got from the components you've already got in play and where your gaps might be. And it's absolutely essential. I think it's when you do a proper kind of risk assessment or set of threat modeling to really understand the likely risks you'll face, because you kind of have to know what you're looking for. And I think part of the problem, and that kind of Sarah's alluded to, is so use of compromised credentials, a compromised device on an otherwise normal user session, or malicious user behavior can be quite hard to distinguish from legitimate user behavior. So actually you have to kind of understand what you're looking for to understand what to bring to people's attention. The real goal for me around kind of the automation around a lot of that is to kind of build up a case and build up a set of intelligence for an actual person to process. But once you start to be able to automate the response to those known threats, you do kind of noise limitation or demand reduction. That means your very precious kind of human resources, because they are your greatest asset in this space, aren't subject to alert fatigue and aren't doing some other piece. They can actually get into the proper, genuine investigative work around understanding, you know, where this might be something more serious, or actually understanding the impact and the consequences of it. And again, those people are also really valuable in understanding your defenses and understanding the space, in doing that kind of threat hunting within the environment, because it can be harder to work out what you've got missing than what you've got, especially if you've got a lot of quite noisy tools. You're generating these huge amounts of alert. Is you'll see a huge amount of data coming out of it, and actually quite often the most important thing is realizing the data stream or the data source that you don't have. And actually spotting that amidst the noise can be really difficult. It's a classic, you know, can't see the wood for the trees problem. Is you kind of go, I've got all of these data, I've got all of these logs. You go, that's fantastic. What happens when this happens? And people go, I wouldn't have any visibility of that. You go, that's your investment. Your investment is the question that you can't answer, that you think is a realistic problem for you.
Okay, and so for an organisation that's listening to this, then Rob, that really feels as though they might have a gap, and really would like some monitoring, what's the best way for them to start assessing? You know, what's their use case is what I'm trying to say. You know, how do we start to define what that is, so that you can understand that, and therefore respond by saying, you know, start with this small bit here, then gradually improve your maturity in this way?
I think it does, as Adam said, it does depend on the maturity of the organisation, but it always starts with, you know, what are the assets? What are the things you're trying to protect? What are the key things to your business? What keys can you not afford to lose? You know, which bits can't stop functioning, and try and get them to think about the business and what things rely on things that could be impacted by cyber. And the obvious ones like reputation, but for most organizations, they want to do something or sell something, so disrupting that process will be critical. So once you've got an idea about what it is they're doing and they want to keep doing, what's valuable to them, you can then think about how you might want to defend that. So you ask some questions such as, you know, in an audit process, you go, where are these things? Do you use these cloud services? Is it on-prem? Where is it? Who looks after it? And then what security controls do you have already? We can use that information to quite quickly understand how well you can defend an organization. And then it's about creating a maturity plan or a roadmap to sort of say, well, okay, you're most worried about this data, its current protection is this, but it could be upgraded to this, and what that would be. And trying to articulate a long-term continuous plan for cyber as well. So that means that they've got to take responsibility for it, which is the first thing. Like, even though they might outsource the problem to us, someone in the organization has to take responsibility for cyber. If there isn't somebody around that does that, that needs to be solved. And it is you know, every organization should take it seriously. People sort of say, oh, it won't affect us. As Sarah says, assume breach, that's where to start. If you haven't been breached already, maybe you just don't know it. But if you think like that, even if you haven't, it's way more healthy. You know, plan for the worst, but hope for the best. But as long as you're planning for the worst and putting things in place and doing it sensibly and thinking about it as a long-term journey, not a silver bullet thing, like you're not going to solve cyber by buying something. It's going to be a program that takes time and investment over time.